This is the captain from the bridge. 41 people have been tested positive for coronavirus.
It's never going to happen to me. It couldn't happen to me. That's what me and my friends were saying on the ship.
All guests, please stay inside your staterooms and do not go outside of your staterooms.
You just feel desperate when you're at sea. Who's going to let us disembark?
I don't think that they were terribly transparent about what they knew when they knew it.
Carnival is, of course, the biggest cruise ship company in the world. And since this began, their ships, more than any other companies, have been struck by these outbreaks of COVID on board.
Hundreds of passengers on these ships have been infected, and some have even died. And Bloomberg Businessweek has been reporting in depth on what went wrong and what's next for Carnival navigating this very challenging crisis. On February 3rd, the Diamond Princess was around the coast of Japan. It had made stops in Hong Kong, it had gone to Taiwan and elsewhere.
It was supposed to be our last night on the cruise. We were supposed to get off the next morning. Around 6:30 that night, an announcement comes throughout the entire ship.
A Hong Kong resident who traveled for 5 days on Diamond Princess from Yokohama to Hong Kong tested positive for coronavirus.
Here it goes.
As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, the situation is under control and therefore there are no reasons for concerns.
That's really when we knew that we probably were not getting off the ship that next morning.
So the ship cruises toward Japan and finally anchors in the evening of February 3rd. At that point, Carnival says that Japanese health officials came aboard and started doing temperature checks, health screenings. Unfortunately, according to passengers, this wasn't a really serious quarantine. Passengers said that they were free to go about the ship.
My cabin mate and the other two guys that we were traveling with, who were in the cabin next door, they went out and they had a grand old time that day, as most people did. Eating in the restaurants, watching the live house bands.
Eventually they find out that there is actually cause for concern.
The Ministry of Health has notified us that 10 people have tested positive for coronavirus. All guests return to their cabin and remain there for the time being.
We have confirmed 10 positive cases, and based on this, we are going to quarantine the entire ship for a minimum of 14 days. So that's when it officially began. We are currently in the middle of day 2 of a 14-day-long quarantine. It is currently day 3. Apparently, 41 new cases on the ship. There are 38 new people who have tested positive, 44 new cases,
66 additional positive cases of coronavirus.
We continue to see the numbers go up every single day. It was an emotional roller coaster.
In the end, more than 700 people were infected, and tragically, at least 11 people ended up dying. And this was just the beginning of the crisis for this company.
I want to highlight one of the most impressive turnaround stories of our era, if not the most impressive turnaround. I'm talking about Carnival, CCL, the world's largest cruise line. Are you bigger than the U.S. Navy?
That's a good question. I never compared numbers of ships, but I doubt it.
The cruise industry is really massive. Carnival Cruise, they say they see about 13 million people annually. This is a booming market. People love to cruise.
We've probably done 24 cruises. Sometimes we've done 2 or 3 in a year if we're lucky.
Cruises are the perfect combination between being convenient, being affordable, and allowing you to just relax.
You pack once, you unpack once, your hotel moves with you, your restaurant moves with you.
Carnival specifically, they own about 30 to 50% of the market. Their annual revenue amounts to about $20 billion. More recently, Carnival has run into some troubles. You might have seen them in the news in the 2010s. They had a boat that capsized and actually sunk, killing about 30 people. And then later on, they had a very high-profile incident in which they lost power on the ship and none of the plumbing worked. But under Arnold Donald, who is the current CEO of Carnival, they've undergone a remarkable turnaround since about 2013.
The more we give people the opportunity to connect and experience the world together, the more spectacular our world will be.
You saw the market cap in the first 5 years under his tenure essentially double to about $50 billion. Ironically, leading into this whole crisis that we've seen, you had Arnold Donald promising that he was actually going to correct things. He had a plan in place to fix all these shortcuts that Carnival had historically been taking.
Our task, our mission, double-digit return on invested capital in the next 3 to 4 years.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the textbook turn. The whole trend has been up.
After the Diamond Princess ship, about a month passes, and then another ship, the Grand Princess, they deal with essentially the same crisis.
We boarded the ship in San Francisco, and
we did think there would be a little more enhanced screening because of what had happened on the Diamond Princess. At a minimum, we thought they would have at least taken our temperature as we boarded the ship, but that never happened. And things just kind of exploded on our way home.
The first tester in, and the coronavirus is on board the Grand Princess. The Coast Guard delivered tests in dramatic fashion, and 21 people tested positive for the virus.
It just kind of escalated quickly. They, sequestered us to our rooms and delivered food to us in our rooms, and obviously that was a major shock of something's wrong.
So like the Diamond Princess in Japan, which they sailed immediately back to port, the Grand Princess headed back to their home port of San Francisco.
3,500 people stuck on that cruise ship off the coast of California. They will finally be coming ashore.
All passengers and crew will be tested for the coronavirus. Those that need to be quarantined will be quarantined.
In the end, it proved a much smaller outbreak than the Diamond Princess, but that's most likely because not everyone chose to get tested. In the end, more than 130 people tested positive, and at least 5 passed away. As these issues are happening aboard the Grand Princess, another ship owned by a different Carnival cruise line, which is Holland America's Zaandam, is sailing around.
The cruise basically set sail more or less the same day that the U.S. State Department warned people not to be going on cruises. And the company just forged ahead with the cruise. For some reason, they decided to keep going.
Life was good that first week. Everything was great, but I saw a friend's picture about having issues getting toilet paper and other things. I was kind of concerned as to how this was going to play out.
March 14th, the ship received word that Chile was planning to close its ports to any cruise ship. And from then on out, that ship was at sea with nowhere to port. On March 22nd, the captain came on the announcement and said, "We have people sick with a flu-like illness. Everybody's got to be confined to their quarters. The whole ship's going into quarantine."
From March 22nd was kind of a different feel. It didn't feel like a cruise anymore. Sometimes I sat out on the deck at night and I would just listen to the waves. Now, sadly, sometimes I listened also to a cascade of people coughing.
After everybody was confined to quarters for a few days, the captain came on the announcement and said, "We're sorry to report that 4 people have passed away over the last couple of days. So many crew on the Zaandam were getting sick that they were having trouble taking care of all the passengers." And so the company made the decision to bring in another ship called the Rotterdam. They started ferrying passengers, 500, 600, 700 passengers who seemed to be less sick. They put them on the Rotterdam. And so now they had 2 ships full of passengers that could not come to port. Panama didn't even want them to go through the canal. Finally, the Panamanian government decided, after all, to let them go through the canal, and that's what happened. Both those ships passed through the canal, and they slowly made their way back to Florida.
After days at sea and with their fate up in the air, a pair of Holland America cruise ships were given clearance to dock at Port Everglades Thursday afternoon.
Yay, we're back home.
We're back
to the States.
There were quite a number of people that were actually sick, and they were taken to hospitals. And of course, there were those 4 people who had passed away that had to be taken home or find a way home.
We've gone through Ebola, Zika, MERS, SARS. The industry, because we're global, we have to deal with this stuff. It's been devastating temporarily, but the long-term future will be great as long as we all stand together.
So since this crisis began, Carnival, its business has really been suffering. We've seen its stock really plummet quite significantly. We spent weeks talking to company executives, and the company was really upbeat and positive, if not defiant. The CEO, Arnold Donald, kept saying, look, back when this first affected our first ship, the world still hadn't known about coronavirus yet. It was still, in his words, it was still a China issue. We talked to the CDC, we talked to the head of their cruise ship task force, Dr. Cindy Friedman, and she said that excuse does not fly. It would be one thing if it was only aboard the Diamond Princess or even the Grand Princess, those first 2 ships, but the fact that this crisis continued to affect Carnival afterward, essentially Carnival should have known better.
I look forward to cruising again one day, but I realize the paradigm has changed. It's very easy to say, would you ever cruise again? But I'm wondering, well, what's the world going to look like? Will we ever be going to a concert, a sporting event? It's not just cruising.
One thing that I do agree with Arnold Donald on, he said this is an unprecedented generational global event. And I think that's totally spot on. And in the years ahead, we're going to look back and we're going to see who responded to that generational crisis well and who did not.